Written and created by Sad Girl Productions. This video is for educational and documentary purposes. All information is sourced from publicly available news archives. No claims are made beyond the information publicly released by law enforcement or the media. It was just after 8 p.m. in Colombia. Inside a small neighborhood restaurant, a 42-year-old Canadian-Colombian man sat alone near the back, waiting for his meal, completely unaware that his photograph had been circulating online for weeks, and unaware that a highly coordinated assassination was already in motion. He didn't know that a multi-million-dollar bounty had been placed on his head, or that a network of hired killers had already tracked him to this exact location. And he certainly didn't know that the man who allegedly ordered his death was a former Olympic snowboarder, who had risen through the criminal world to become one of the most wanted fugitives on the planet. At around 8:13 p.m., a gunman walked casually through the door, moved with purpose toward the back table, and without hesitation raised a handgun and fired 5 rounds into the victim's head. The killing was fast, clinical, and carried out in front of a room full of stunned bystanders. Within seconds, the shooter vanished back into the streets of Medellín, leaving behind a single unmistakable message. This is what happens when you agree to testify against Ryan Wedding. The murder might have just disappeared into the long list of contract killings that plague Colombia, but on November 19, 2025, everything changed. In Washington, D.C., officials from the FBI, the U.S. Justice Department, the State Department, and the RCMP stepped up to the podium and announced one of the most explosive criminal updates North America has seen in years. A new indictment had been unsealed, dozens of arrests had been made across 3 countries, and the reward for information leading to the capture of Ryan James Wedding had been raised to an unprecedented $15 million. The message from law enforcement was unified and direct. The former Canadian Olympian was now considered one of the most dangerous criminal figures operating anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, standing beside a giant wanted poster showing Wedding's face. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi described him as the architect of a transnational drug empire capable of moving more than 6 metric tons of cocaine a year. He allegedly moved it from Colombia, through Mexico and California, and into Canada and American cities. She said he wasn't just a trafficker, but the leader of a violent operation that relied heavily on intimidation, extortion, and murder to protect its interests. Behind her, FBI Director Kash Patel went even further, calling Wedding a modern-day Escobar, someone who, in his words, engineered a level of narco-terrorism that federal agents had not encountered in a very long time. At the same briefing, RCMP Commissioner Mike Duham confirmed that 7 Canadians with ties to the network had been arrested the day before. Their charges ranged from cocaine trafficking to conspiracy to commit murder, and all of them were now expected to be extradited to the United States to stand trial. What separated Wedding from others wasn't just ambition, it was access. He built relationships with traffickers in the U.S. federal system, then leveraged those connections to build direct supply lines that bypassed mid-level brokers and quickly worked his way up the ladder. He started to deal directly with cartel intermediaries and allegedly moved weight directly from California to Canada. By the time he was first charged in Canada in the early 2010s, investigators believed he was already tied to large-scale cocaine importation. For Canada, he explained, this wasn't just another criminal case. Wedding's organization had become one of the top threats to public safety in the country, responsible for a string of murders, attempted killings, and mistaken identity attacks that left innocent families shattered. Officials also revealed that the takedown was part of a wider multinational effort known as Operation Giant Slalom. A long-running investigation built through undercover meetings, surveillance in multiple countries, intercepted communications and cooperation from insiders. They described it as the most significant coordinated strike yet against Wedding's empire. But they made it clear the work wasn't finished. 4 key suspects were still at large, including the man at the top. And as the cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, law enforcement repeated one final warning: wherever he was hiding, whether in Mexico, Canada, or anywhere else, Ryan Wedding would be found. Ryan James Wedding did not begin his life as a criminal kingpin. In fact, his early years looked almost nothing like the world he would eventually step into. Born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, in 1981, he grew up with the dream of representing Canada on the world stage. And he achieved exactly that. In February of 2002, he stepped into the start gate at the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics to compete in the men's parallel giant slalom, which is one of the most technical events in alpine skiing and snowboarding. The gates are set extremely close together, forcing riders to make rapid, precise turns at high speed. It demands reflexes, edge control, and near-perfect timing. One mistake, one late turn, and the entire run collapses. An Olympic sport that takes intense levels of discipline. During the competition, he ended up finishing in 24th place. Not a medal performance, but enough to secure his identity as an Olympian, a title only a small fraction of athletes ever earn. But after the Games, life didn't unfold the way it does for most national athletes. There was no long career, no steady stream of sponsorships, and no smooth transition into coaching or commentary. He later struggled with injuries, unstable income, and what he later described as an inability to return to normal life after competing at the highest level in the sports world. Sources say he moved into the nightlife, and then into the drug scene, then into distribution. By the mid-2000s, Wedding's name had begun surfacing in drug investigations across Western Canada. In 2010, he was arrested in the United States after attempting to purchase cocaine from an undercover federal agent. An operation so unusual, he later claimed the Americans had used a former KGB operative as bait. The courts rejected the argument, and he served several years in U.S. federal prison. When he came out, authorities now say he made a pivotal decision. Instead of returning to Canada, instead of going legitimate, he moved south, deeper into the criminal underworld, and embedded himself inside Mexico, where the Sinaloa Cartel was already dominating much of the Western Hemisphere's cocaine trade. Investigators allege this is where everything changed, with contacts, money, and ambition. Wedding aligned himself with cartel logistics and began building the Canadian branch of a pipeline that stretched from Colombian jungles to Mexican warehouses, to stash houses in Southern California, and eventually into Canada aboard long-haul semi-trucks. By 2024, American prosecutors say Wedding had evolved from a mid-level trafficker into a full-scale transnational operator, coordinating shipments weighing hundreds of kilograms at a time. He recruited transporters, paid informants, laundered money through jewelry stores, and relied heavily on intimidation and violence to enforce discipline. U.S. officials referred to him as the Giant and Public Enemy, nicknames that reflected the control he allegedly had over the organization. His second-in-command, another Canadian named Andrew Clark, was eventually arrested in Mexico in late 2024. At that point, federal agents had already begun tying Wedding's network to multiple homicides in Ontario, including the mistaken identity triple shooting in Caledon that killed an innocent visiting couple from India and left their daughter critically injured. The organization was also linked to another murder in Niagara, another in Peel region, and an attempted killing connected to a drug debt. Authorities said the violence wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message and maintaining the flow of product through North America. By March 2025, the FBI placed Wedding on its 10 most wanted fugitives list and announced a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. The State Department, working with Canadian and Mexican partners, began posting his face on digital billboards throughout major cities. There were even reports, later reinforced by court filings, that he may have undergone plastic surgery to alter his appearance. Yet despite all this, the organization continued operating. Shipments continued crossing borders. Money kept moving. Associates remained loyal. And in January 2025, as prosecutors prepared their case for trial, Wedding allegedly made the single most consequential decision of his criminal career: to order the murder of the key witness who could help bring him down. That decision would ignite an international firestorm and ultimately lead to one of the largest coordinated crackdowns on a Canadian criminal figure in modern history. Thanks for watching or listening to this episode from Sad Girl Productions. More stories are available on the channel.